So welcome to this course from me and my cat, who, of course, wishes to be in it. Are you very expert on the subject of nutrition? No. I didn't think so. Lovely. So yes, thank you. So in this first video, we're going to talk a bit about some of the fundamental principles that you need to understand. And I apologise for the cat's tail in the background. What can you do when you have a cat? Which incidentally I actually don't with my neighbours, but he just moves in when he feels like it. Sorry, neighbours. Okay, so the very first thing that we want to get clear, and I alluded to this in one of the introductory frequently asked questions videos before we started. So if you saw that, you'll know where we're going. But in any case, most people, yes, when they're talking about the topic of weight loss, they use that term as if that is their goal. Some people do lose weight. Now, unfortunately, that is not a good goal to have. To lose weight is actually very easy. There are some very simple ways that you can do that quite quickly. The most effective way, for example, is to just stop drinking water. And famously, there have been some actors who did that for roles. We can think of Hugh Jackman apparently did that for when the film adaptation of Les Miserables, which. Why anyone thought that was a good idea when he had to sing, I cannot imagine. But that caused him to lose an extreme amount of weight very quickly and look extremely ill. Because water is quite heavy in the body. So yes, if you do just stop drinking water, you lose weight very quickly. Unfortunately, it is of course extremely unhealthy and totally unsustainable because within a few days you would be dead. There are various other ways that you can lose weight in what may seem like a more healthy way. So just massively cutting your calories, basically starving yourself. Also doing an awful lot of cardio work, so running for hours on a treadmill. You'll lose weight quickly. The problem is that actually when you talk about losing weight, probably isn't quite what you mean. What most people are actually aiming to do is to lose fat. Because the excess fat, we know that's what is potentially to make you unhealthy and probably makes you unhappy with the way that you look. If we just lose weight, that's not necessarily what we want to do, because what we actually want to do is to preserve and possibly increase muscle whilst losing the fat. And of course muscle is actually heavier than fat, so if you were to replace your fat with muscle, you'd actually gain weight, but you'd be healthier and you'd be happy with the way you look. So what we're going to be talking about in this course is how to lose fat, not necessarily weight. We actually want to gain muscle. We will talk about that a little bit, but we don't entirely have time in just 4 weeks to go into that in detail, but we will touch on it. And it's worth pointing out that what I'm saying applies equally well to men and to women. I feel sometimes, some men, when they hear about gaining muscle, they think, yes, great, that's what I want. And some women think that doesn't apply to them because you think, I don't want the body of a weightlifter. Well, of course, because of the physiological differences, particularly in hormone production between men and women, if women follow the exact same regime in terms of eating lots of protein and doing lots of weightlifting that a man would do, they will obviously only gain a fraction of the muscle mass that the man would do, following the same regime. So don't worry, you're not going to get the body of a weightlifter if that is not your aim. It just will cause the muscles to be a little more toned, which is probably the physique that you're looking for. But obviously, because of physiological differences, the percentage relative, of body fat for women is always going to be a lot higher than for a man of the same kind of age and health and so on. It's also worth pointing out while we're on the subject that for women, I know sometimes they've got into their heads that the aim is to get this perfectly flat stomach, and unfortunately you get a lot of fitness instructors and so on telling them that. It's just worth pointing out, any fitness instructors who do tell you that, you should call them out for very sexist remarks, because for most women that is actually physiologically impossible due to the way that your organs are arranged. Unfortunately, the uterus is slightly tipped forward and has to be covered by a layer of fat to protect it. So as long as you have a uterus, you're probably not going to have a flat stomach. You can still have a fantastic physique, just won't be totally flat. And you can get that by losing the excess fat and toning the muscles, which will help to hold everything in. So you can still feel very happy with the way you look in the mirror. But don't listen to anyone who tells you your stomach isn't flat enough. You can tell them where to get off. And that, at the end of the day, is the aim of this. Obviously, we want people to be healthy, but you also want to be happy with what you see in the mirror, because there's nothing wrong with a bit of vanity. So, just to summarise this, the important takeaway is that we are aiming to lose fat, not weight, because that could include losing muscle or losing water, both of which are not good for your health and not good for your physique either. So, since the important thing here is to lose fat, we're going to be doing some measurements as we go along through this course and beyond, because obviously in only 4 weeks you may not see a huge improvement, and that's fine. But you're going to carry this on for as long as you feel you need to reach your goals. So, some of the measurements that we can do. You're probably thinking, well, the bathroom scales, that's how you measure losing weight. But as we've already said, we're not going to be talking about losing weight. So you can use them, but be aware that it's not very accurate. It's not really going to help you that much, because you could find that your weight's actually gone up, but actually what you've done is you've converted fat into muscle, which is ideal. So don't worry too much about bathroom scales. What we really want to do is we want a way of measuring the percentage body fat that you have. Now, if we want to do this really accurately, then we'd need hospital scans. The ideal is a DEXA scan, which you may have heard of because it's a common diagnostic tool. It's used, for example, for osteoporosis. It's diagnosed with a DEXA scan usually because it measures the bone density. But what it actually does is it measures the tissue density all over your body. So it can also tell you very accurately what percentage of fat you have everywhere. Now, if you do have a condition where you have to regularly have DEXA scans, then obviously you can ask for a printout and you may be able to get it that way. But for most of us, a DEXA scan is going to be difficult to obtain. Now, there are private clinics that will offer it, so you may be able to pay to have one done, but they can be quite expensive. I've heard varying reports of them varying from sort of £100 to £300 here, and similarly in the US people have said, someone said they cost $90, somebody else said they got one for $400, so it really depends, and it may not be obviously an option for you. They are very accurate, but there are other ways that you can measure it, and an inexpensive measurement tool, which is shown here. These are just little calipers that you can then fit onto your stomach, which is representative of the percentage body fat around you, and you can see there's little instructions. These do not cost very much if you get them on the internet, so this is an option. But if you don't want to buy any equipment, or you're not able to, that is fine too. Because what we're going to do is we're going to use this little chart here. Now, obviously, this is not totally accurate, but it's a pretty good guide, and it will certainly do to be going on with. But it does require you to be very, very honest. And it is best not to go from your own memory, but to actually go to a mirror, have a good look at yourself and compare it to this chart and decide which one that you most closely match. And that will give us our percentage range of body fat that we're going to start off with. So the most obvious way to record our progress and so on, if you're using this chart in particular, is simply to take photographs, and that way you can easily compare them to the chart and you can see how you move down the chart. You might also want to take some measurements with a tape measure. For example, you might want to measure your waist and hips. You've probably heard medical professionals mentioning the importance of waist to hips ratio in predicting diseases like heart disease and so on. So it's a good thing to be aware of, particularly if you feel that might be a problem for you. Ideally, obviously, you would tend to measure your waist around the narrowest point, which would be yes. If you have difficulty doing that, particularly if you're carrying more fat, that can sometimes be quite difficult. Another way you could do it is if you measure it, so you put the tape measure right over your belly button and then measure it around from there. The important thing, doesn't really matter where you choose to measure it from, the important thing is that you do it the same every time. So if you are measuring over your belly button, don't then move it later, because that would be cheating, because it needs to be consistent. And then again, measure your hips around that widest point. And you might want to note that down weekly. Okay, so we're going to start to talk now about how we're going to go about this fat loss. Now, the first thing to understand is to remember a very basic law of energy in terms of weight loss, and we're talking weight loss here. Some people get very confused about this because they have read an awful lot of different diet books which give you so many different theories, and they make it overcomplicated. Whereas actually it's really very simple, because it does come down to basic laws of energy. Laws of thermodynamics, all of those kinds of things, which you may only remember from school, but it doesn't matter. Your body works in the same way. So the amount of energy you put into it is relative to the amount of energy that comes out. If you put in more energy than you are expending, then your body is going to store the excess as fat. If you put in less energy than you're expending, it needs to use fat to expend that energy. So it is really as simple as if you eat less calories than you have used during the day, you will lose weight. And there's all sorts of arguments about this. Various books have been written explaining, well, it's not that simple. Unfortunately, it is actually that simple, and there have been experiments. There was a famous one where a nutrition professor ate 2/3 of his daily calories from absolute junk. You know, we're talking cakes, donuts, cookies, that kind of thing. But he still lost weight because he ate less calories. He'd calculated, obviously, the exact amount that he was using every day, and he ate less than that. Even eating complete junk food, he'll still lose weight. The problem, of course, is that, as we've talked about, we don't want to just lose weight. What you would tend to do then is you will lose some muscle instead of fat, so you could actually gain fat despite losing weight. And obviously you're going to be clogging up your arteries and various other problems not related to weight specifically. So that is why we have the importance of calorie counting. Unfortunately, there are some of these diets will try and helpfully tell you that no, calorie counting is boring and we don't need to do it. But we really, really do. Remember what a teacher that I had in nutrition a while ago, who was actually a pilot, and used the analogy of, you know, would you want to fly a plane with somebody who said they weren't going to check the fuel gauge? Because they weren't interested in how much food or how much fuel they put into their plane, only in the quality of it. So they wanted to make sure it was the nicest possible clean fuel, which would probably extend the life of their engine. The problem is, if you don't look at how much you're putting in it, you don't actually know if you're going to reach your destination, and you might simply crash on the way. It's not a very safe way to fly a plane. Similarly, we all know people we've probably come across at some point who can go on a wonderful diet without counting any calories and they still lose weight. Fine, but it's luck. The problem is if you don't know how many calories that you are putting into your body, then you can't be sure that you're going to lose weight. You also, however, do need to make sure that they are the right kind of calories for losing fat, because we don't want to just lose weight per se. So planning out exactly what you're putting in your body is a good idea, but you do also need to count the calories if you want to make sure that you are actually reducing them. Because otherwise, even if you are eating the healthiest foods imaginable, they're still going to get stored as fat if you're eating more calories than you can use in that day. Now, when we talk about eating the right kinds of food, a lot of people immediately think, right, that means cutting out the carbs and, cutting out fat because that makes you fat. And that's simply not true. Anything that you eat will make you fat if you're eating too much of it. So if you're going over your calorie need for the day, then you will store any excess as fat. It doesn't mean that just fat will be stored as fat, of course. Fat, in particular, is essential for life. Every cell in your body, obviously, its cell membrane is partly made out of fat. Particularly your brain is about 60% fat. So without fats, you would die. So the idea that fat is bad is just wrong. It does matter the type of fat. You've probably heard of the famous essential fatty acids. Whereas, for example, you get trans fats and things which are found in junk food, that kind of thing, which have no nutritional value, really. So the type of fat does matter, and we will talk about that later, but it's important not to get hung up on the idea that fat makes you fat, because it doesn't work like that. Equally, carbohydrates, including various kinds of sugar and so on, people immediately think, hey, they make you fat. Again, they are essential for energy, and it's no good going out trying to do a workout in the gym and cutting out your carbohydrates. It's not going to work because you need energy. Equally, you need your metabolism to keep working at a healthy rate, otherwise it's not going to burn off any fat that you do have. So it's no use trying to starve it into submission. It's not going to help. Now, one particular food group that you do need to have a lot of, ideally, if you're trying to conserve the muscle that you have whilst losing the fat, is obviously protein. Some people get very heated about this debate. Unfortunately, there are still a lot of people who argue that means, eating 12 steaks a day because there's no other way to get protein. This is, of course, a myth. I think anyone who thinks that vegans can't get enough protein should look up I believe he still holds the record for being the world's strongest man, and I dare you to say that to his face, that he's an idiot for not eating meat. You can get protein from a myriad of different sources. Generally, however, if you're looking to get a lot of protein, you would not want to get it from meat, even apart from the ethical concerns, because generally then you will be getting a lot of fat, and too much fat will clog your arteries. It's not good. So yes, how you choose to get your protein is up to you according to your lifestyle choices, but just be aware that plant protein is absolutely fine. And now one other little basic tenet about that, kind of related to that. Some people get very, again, heated on the debate about, whether you should take lots of supplements. Some people just end up taking more and more and more of them, and others say, no, they're terrible for you. Again, it's a debate that will go on and on and on, and we don't have time to go into in too much detail. But generally speaking, most experts agree the more nutrition that you can get from whole foods, the better. So where possible, that's what you want to go with, and obviously, ideally, you want to have the freshest possible food, so avoiding the junk food, the ready meals. You don't need to tell you that that's not healthy, because we all know that by now. Ideally, you want meals, that are made with proper ingredients and organic vegetables where possible, and all of these things, if possible. Unfortunately, it is not possible for everyone because of time constraints and the expense. Unfortunately, generally, the healthier things are for you, the more expensive they are, which is very unfair, but that is the reality of the world we live in. So don't panic if it's not possible for you. Just, strive to do the best you can. That's all you can do. If perhaps because of some of those reasons, when you do your meal planning and you work out it's simply not possible for you to get the right balance of macronutrients, perhaps you simply can't get enough protein, or you can't get the right essential fatty acids or whatever you're looking at, and it's not possible, then it's a good idea to start looking perhaps at supplements if you're able to, because although it may be better to get them from whole foods, you could argue it's better to get them from a supplement than not at all. So again, it will depend on what is available to you. Obviously, if you are looking at supplements, it's important to get good quality ones, and so then again they can be expensive. So you just have to be realistic about what you can actually achieve. Like all these things, you don't have to be perfect. Depending on where you're starting from and what you're able to do, little improvements are all going to help. Another question that people often ask is, how often should you eat meals when you're attempting to sort of lose the excess fat? There has been various research on this, and some researchers have suggested, oh yes, actually eating smaller meals more often is better for you, but then other researchers have found, nope, actually it makes no difference at all. And some have found the complete opposite, so there really isn't any consensus on this. Generally, the best option is what works best for you. So depending on obviously your lifestyle, if you are working long hours or something and you can only eat at certain times, and that's when you're going to be eating. If you find that you are constantly getting hungry throughout the day and going out and snacking, then put that into your meal plan that you create, which we'll be creating during this course. Because there's no point, feeling really hungry, particularly if you know that your willpower is such that you're going to go out and snack anyway. Just plan that in so that the snack is, scheduled. And you may find that having multiple smaller meals throughout the day helps you control your hunger better. But it really does depend what works best for you. That is generally the best solution. Most nutritionists would recommend not eating heavy meals, obviously at least a few hours before you go to bed. Partly that is to do with promoting fat loss, but also just generally for your health. You don't really want to go to bed with a lot of undigested food in your stomach. And the same applies to timing of exercise generally, whatever you might be doing. There's no point saying you must go to the gym at 5 a.m. because that's when your body is best able to do. I have actually read that in books. Well, I can assure you, if I went to the gym at 5 a.m, I'd pass out within 2 minutes. I am not a morning person. I cannot cope with mornings, and I would be very ill if I tried to do that at that time. So it's complete nonsense. Everyone's circadian rhythms work slightly differently, and you need to do what's best for you. If going to the gym at a certain time makes you feel really ill, then don't do it. Try doing it another time and see if you get on better. And so obviously the same applies with meal timings. Some people just, find that they're hungry at different times. Yes, as I say, if you're not sure when would be best, then just experiment. Play around until you find what works for you. The only caveat with meal timings, as I say, it's entirely up to you, but one thing you might find useful if you're doing quite a lot of exercise, perhaps if you're going to the gym for a regular workout session, then you might find it useful to plan in a sort of pre-workout meal, usually about half an hour beforehand, and then a post-workout one about half an hour afterwards. And we will talk about that in the meal planning. It's not essential, but you might find that it works best for really helping it, particularly if you're trying to sort of increase your muscle mass. On that note, obviously I touched on this in one of the intro videos, but I will just say again that if you're aiming particularly to put on a lot of muscle, that isn't very compatible with cutting out fat, because obviously the the fuel that you're putting into your body, i.e. the food, if it's going to be building up muscle, you're going to need actually quite a lot of it. So generally you would eat more calories than you would actually need to burn in the day, and that's going to be used to make muscle. The problem is, you think, well, how does your body know whether to make muscle or fat? Well, it doesn't. It will make both, because you can't exactly measure how much exactly exercise you need to do to make X amount of muscle and so on. It's too complicated. So you will need to eat an excess number of calories. Not just that, obviously. There is more to it than that. But that will then build up the muscle whilst also putting on fat. So what you would then do is you would then go back to the calorie reduction, and also obviously, as I say, other factors as well, which we're going to talk about in this course. That will then reduce the fat, but the idea is you reduce the fat whilst keeping the muscle that you have put on. And you would go around in cycles if that is your aim. But as I say, don't have time to go into great depth in this course because it is only 4 weeks. So what we're going to be talking about in this course, we're going to be focusing on losing fat whilst preserving muscle, but not specifically putting on more muscle. The reason being is that most people, their main aim, at least at first, is to lose excess fat because they want to lose weight, as they would often put it. As I say, it's not the best terminology to use, it's just what the media and everything have always used for so long. But yes, if that is your aim, and obviously, as I say, what your aim probably really is to lose fat. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this course. We're going to aim, as I say, to preserve muscle, but not necessarily to put more on, because you would then need to do that once you've lost the fat, or at least lost a certain amount of it. So yes, as I say, that is a sort of a topic for another day. But that doesn't mean that you wouldn't still be going to the gym if that's something that you enjoy doing, or whatever you're doing. You need to be doing your sort of your exercise as well to help burn off the excess calories, also burn off the fat, and to keep making a certain amount of more muscle, just to preserve the muscle that you have, rather than adding bulk onto it. So I hope that makes sense. As I say, there will be a question and answer section on Thursday if you do have any questions or anything doesn't quite make sense. And so I hope this this introduction was helpful. As I say, Thursday afternoon there will be a live question and answer session. So if you have any questions in the meantime, burning questions, you don't want to forget them, then please feel free to post them as a comment on this video. I will be going through over the next couple of days answering any questions that I think, I can quickly answer that. If I do see the same question coming up quite a lot, then I will put that into the video on Thursday. But the video will be streamed live, so if you are able to attend, obviously you can ask your questions on that video, so that we can have a little discussion about them if something isn't clear. Obviously, if you're catching up on this video late, you can still feel free to ask your questions. I will still keep going through them and answering questions up until the course ends. So that's just a quick overview of basic fundamentals that we're going to be needing to understand this course. Now, as I did say, obviously the of the important things about all of this is that we get this personalised to you. So in the next video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to learn how to calculate our basal metabolic rate, which is going to give us a reasonably accurate figure for how many calories that you're going to burn up just by your day-to-day living. And then we're going to work out macronutrient profile, so macronutrients being, you know, the protein, the carbohydrates, fats, they're the key ones that we're going to talk about, which again obviously needs to be personalised to you. And so we're going to use that to determine what our daily calorie intake should be, and what kind of foods that we should be getting that from. So what's the percentage of each macronutrient that we should be aiming for? And obviously that will depend very much on you, so it will depend on factors, you know, particularly where you're starting from now, where you're aiming to get to, and so on. Now obviously I should point out as a little disclaimer, all of these calculations can't fully take into account differences in genetics which do affect your metabolism, so they're not 100% accurate, but they are a very good starting point. So hope you will join me next week when we'll be going through that. So we've covered the important concept here that the number of calories that you take in needs to be less than the amount that you are burning off in order to lose fat. But some of you will be thinking, I'm sure, that you've tried this in the past, you've cut your calories down, and you still haven't lost weight. This is a common thing that people will say, and this is what leads to a lot of these sort of fad diet books in particular to claim that actually it's not that simple, and in fact calories don't matter, and so on. But of course they do. But that brings us on to the other part of the equation here, which is obviously the fact that your metabolism does vary considerably. Now the reason obviously that this matters is because, as I said, in the next video we're going to be calculating our basal metabolic rate, and that will determine the number of calories that we should be eating in a day. But as I say, it differs greatly from person to person, and some of the factors that influence it are genetic, and so there is nothing that you can do about them. Now, when we do our calculation next week, we will take into account some of the differences. So, for example, there is obviously a difference between men and women in their metabolic rate. There is also a difference in your age. Children obviously will burn off a lot more calories than so cute. Children's metabolism obviously runs much faster, it tends to slow down as you get older. Oh, darling. It's also the case that the more fat that you already have on you, so the greater your weight, often that will actually increase your metabolism. Having more muscle on you will increase it even more. And this is often the reason why diets tend to plateau. People who start off on a diet will often lose weight much more quickly, and then as they get more towards their ideal weight, it can slow down and stop entirely because the metabolism is actually slowing down as they're losing weight. It's also worth pointing out that your metabolism is controlled by a large number of hormones. There are all sorts of different factors which come into this. You probably know about the insulin regulating blood sugar, and so on. Thyroxine also will help to control your metabolism. But there are also many others, estrogen, leptin, there's all sorts of different hormones that will have an effect on your metabolism. What that means, of course, if you do have any kind of imbalance in any of those hormones, that can then affect your metabolism. And this can be caused by illnesses, for example, diabetes interfering with insulin production. It could also be, for example, I mentioned estrogen is one of them. So women will often find they will put weight on at certain times in the menstrual cycle, and then they won't be able to lose it, and then later on they will. It's also interesting to note that cortisol also has an effect on your metabolism. So if you are suffering from serious amounts of stress, that will also affect your metabolism. So there are a number of factors which we simply can't change. Also, there is a certain element that we don't fully understand, in which your metabolic rate is simply inherited from your parents. You can easily see that a tendency to put a lot of weight on, for example, very often runs in families, and the reverse is also true. Skinny people tend to have skinny children, and as I say, that is not fully understood. So there are factors that we can't do anything about, but there are also a number that we can, and that is to do with our nutrition and our level of activity, which is what we're going to be talking about in this mini course. So if you have found that in the past you've counted the calories and you think you've eaten less calories than you burned off, but you haven't lost weight, then there could actually be a number of reasons for this, and quite often it's actually to do with the fact that perhaps you made a mistake when counting up the calories. It's incredibly easy to do. Often the reasons for this are things like hidden calories. So for example, you might have forgotten to include the olive oil that you used as a dressing on your salad. Even a very small amount of olive oil can actually contain several hundred calories. It is good for you, by the way, it's a healthy fat, but all these little things need to be accounted for. Often you might go into the kitchen and you have a little snack of something and you just forget to write it down, so that is a very common problem. Another thing is to look at how you are actually calculating your calories. Now we're going to look at this more in the next lesson, but there are various apps and so on these days. There's lots of websites and all sorts of things that you can use, but they're not all totally accurate. Also, it's very, very easy to just press, oh yes, that's what I had. Did you actually weigh out though? Did you actually have that much of it? Also, sometimes calories can differ quite a lot whether something is raw or cooked. So you need to know what they are calculating on the app that you're using. So all of these things can cause errors in the calculation, and so often what you would find is actually you are eating more calories than you think, and therein lies the problem. But one of the other things that we have to consider, obviously, as I say, is our metabolism, and there are various things that we can do to help to raise up our metabolism, and we're going to be talking about plenty of those in this course. So I hope that you have enjoyed week 1 and you found this informative. As I say, there will be a PDF summary uploaded onto the group as well, containing some of the key points. And please join me next week, where we will be calculating our basal metabolic rate and starting to devise a meal plan which is personalised for you.